There's a part of me that genuinely loves the slow burn nature of this show and just being immersed into Tolkien's Middle-earth, but I just feel that they could be doing more story-wise. Welcome one and all fantasy fans, thank you for clicking on my review for the first 2 episodes of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. I know I'm pretty late in discussing this premiere. The show came out as I was covering the Venice Film Festival, couldn't cover it back then, but as a fantasy nut, I still wanted to check out this show, and now that I finally checked out the first 2 episodes, I wanted to share my thoughts. For reference, I'm not a hardcore Tolkien fan. I love the original trilogy, and I even like the first 2 Hobbit movies, but I never dove into the books, never wrote into his extended material, and I never even heard of the appendices the series is based on until the credits came up on screen. So I don't go into this show with massive expectations. I don't go into the show even knowing at all what to expect. I just go into this series as a fantasy fan and a fan of good stories on movies and television. So, as you probably know better than me, this show is set in the fabled Second Age of Middle-earth's history. From the darkest depths of the Misty Mountains, where we meet Durin himself, who I only ever heard of, to the majestic forests of the elf capital of Lindon, where we meet up with a young Elrond and even an elven warrior who we all know and love, named Galadriel, to the breathtaking island kingdom of Numenor and the farthest reaches of the map. This show has a massive scale and scope, naturally following several stories with several different characters. Some of them I knew, like the ones I named, but there's a plethora of new ones as well, like Nori the Harfoot, Arondir, who's this mysterious warrior who's helping Brownwyn as she tries to escape her village, as she's warning everyone about the evil that is to come, and even a mysterious character named the Stranger, who I personally suspect could maybe be Sauron. Before we dive further down into the Misty Mountains of my thoughts on the premiere episodes of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, I want to give a huge thank you to this video's sponsor, Movie Palette. Movie Palette creates colorful paintings of your favorite movies, consisting of stripes of colors carefully chosen by their team of artists. Each stripe is carefully put in chronological order to complete the movie palette of the whole movie on one canvas. For my first movie palette, I chose La La Land. It is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is one of the most gorgeous movies I've ever seen, and the palette certainly reflects that. I was so indecisive between this and Blade Runner, The Lion King, Avengers Endgame, Treasure Planet, but ultimately, La La Land won my heart. You can check out their entire collection of beautiful canvas paintings at moviepalette.com, link in the description, and you can use code RAN15 for a 15% discount on a movie palette of your choice. That's REN15 RAN15 for a movie palette of your choice. And thank you so much to Movie Palette for their incredible support and these beautiful works of art. Guys, seriously, this is wonderful material. Make sure to use my code for a 15% discount on a movie palette of your choice. Tag me on Twitter or Instagram so I can see what you got for yourself. I cannot wait to display this on the back. Thanks again to Movie Palette, and remember, RAN15 for 15% discount on a movie palette of your choice. This is a show with a massive scope, massive scale, and a massive budget that you can see being spent on screen at every single frame, be it from the landscapes, the gorgeous visuals, the sensational CGI work, and even wonderful practical effects that I'm sure are due to J.A. Bayona, who directs the crap out of these first 2 episodes. And overall, I enjoyed these first 2 episodes. They didn't blow my mind, they didn't steer me away, but the show so far feels like a collection of small stories all happening at the same time on Middle-earth that barely connect. Gives it more of a sense of it being an anthology rather than one grand adventure where all these stories are connected. We're 2 episodes in, I don't think the show should be revealing its hand too soon, but I think these stories should be steered in one single direction and we could start making sense of it. And so far, I don't see that. I enjoy these characters, I think all their little stories are interesting, but I'm not riveted. I'm not watching this show at the edge of my seat at every single moment. They inject a ton of lore and history into these first 2 episodes. The opening of the premiere episode is very reminiscent to the opening of the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, where it's a bunch of Galadriel's backstory and we see the journey of the elves into Middle-earth and we see a big battle. It all looks sensational. But so far, it does feel a little bit aimless. I'm not entirely connected to any particular one of these stories. In fact, there's 1 or 2 stories that I'm interested in, but not so much the other ones. There's a part of me that genuinely loves the slow burn nature of this show and just being immersed into Tolkien's Middle-earth in a time that I'm so unfamiliar with, exploring the power dynamics within the elven kingdoms, the human world, and down into the Misty Mountains with the dwarves that I just love the dwarves. They're so fun. They give so little a shit about what others think of them. Even when Elrond goes down there and Durin just mocks him, everything looks so intricate and elaborate. The designs of the costumes and the world are just so detailed, and the iconography really comes to life in every shot. But I just feel that they could be doing more story-wise with the time they're taking to establish each and every one of these characters, each and every one of their dynamics, and how each of these kingdoms work individually and in relation to one another. There's just a ton here that is very unclear when it comes to the world building because the show is so bothered in trying to craft an elaborate mystery. Maybe it is too elaborate for its own good. When it comes to the stranger, there's barely anything that we learn from one episode to the next. The first episode ends with him crashing down in this comet that lands near the Harfoot village, and in the other episode, he starts to create this back and forth, this shorthand with Nori, who's really the cutest, a real kind soul, but we barely learn anything new about him other than he doesn't speak English. My biggest issue with the Rings of Power so far is that 2 episodes in, we're still handling setup. We're still meeting all the characters. We're still discerning what all their motivations are. We don't have a clear goal for most of them. Apart from Galadriel, she is a badass. Morpeth Clark is wonderful in this role. As soon as the show starts, it feels very much like it's got its direction cleared up. It knows where it's going. It's because we're meeting all these other characters, all these other power dynamics that the show has to flesh out, that it kind of stops the show from proceeding with its own very, at first, fast momentum. When we have action, it's all well done, but we need a story to carry that action. And so far, the show doesn't have much of that. No other story in this show so far, at least, feels as clear in its purpose and intent as Galadriel's feel. Even her feels somewhat adrift by the second episode. And that will be funny if you've seen the second episode. And that is not to say that I don't like what the show is setting up. When it comes to Elrond and Durin and that age-old rivalry and feud between dwarves and elves, I like that. I like what is presented so far in this show, where these two were friends before, but each of their kingdoms, each of their responsibilities took them away from one another, and so they're trying to mend their relationship, and there's a lot of resentment there, and who knows if that's going to be carried into further generations. That we know, for instance, Thorin Oakenshield carries that grudge towards the elves who abandoned the dwarves. Every other story just feels unclear in its path, but not without promise. Arondir and Brownwyn are 2 intriguing characters, very well played by their respective actors, with powerful chemistry on screen, in a story that carries strong themes of prejudice, but I don't really know what they're about. I couldn't describe their personality after 2 episodes. The show seems to prioritize mystery above anything else. It feels very much like we're back in the old J.J. Abrams days, where he gives us a mystery box that we have to decipher instead of allowing characters to be fleshed out along with the world building. That is never more prevalent than in the story of Nori, who finds the stranger who fell down from a comet. Now, I suspect that this dude is Sauron because Galadriel, clearly the lead character of the show, is looking for Sauron. But these 2 stories don't even intersect yet. Again, they're not steered into a clear direction that converges all the stories. So for now, the show just feels a little bit scattered. Is that the end of the world? Is the sky going to fall down because we're still setting up after 2 episodes? Not really. But 2 episodes in a 10-episode series, it would serve this show well if the direction was clear, if we had a sense that these stories naturally gravitated into one another. And I'm just not seeing that right now. I bet I'm sounding way more negative than I intend, because the craft on a technical standpoint behind the scenes bringing this entire world to life, it is absolutely seamless. This is one of the greatest achievements from a visual standpoint in television history. The makeup is flawless, the costumes are lavish and gorgeous, the cinematography is wonderful. This show is utterly immersive, and from a visual standpoint, faultless. Even the action sequences are gorgeous. There are so many creatures on screen, and they look absolutely phenomenal. Again, not just the CGI and these big set pieces, be it in the water, inside the Misty Mountains, going down these massive lifts, but even this practical monster that shows up at one point in Brownwind's house. I love so much being practical effects because I'm such a huge defender of practical effects, particularly when it comes to creature design and creature effects on screen. It instills that sense of creepiness and fright that I love to see. Tolkien has always been light when it comes to tone. His stories are filled with whimsy and wonder, but he has never been afraid of inserting horror elements here and there. And so I love seeing that spread throughout these first 2 episodes. Quick, before I give you my final thoughts for the premiere of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, I need you to start the conversation in the comments below. Who is your favorite character this far? What is your favorite story? And between the 2 premiere episodes, which one is your favorite? Anything and everything down there. And if you want to see more Rings of Power reviews, if you're enjoying this review, or if you love movies and TV, this is the place to be. So consider clicking that subscribe button and you won't miss any future conversations on your favorite movies and TV. My biggest issue is that not only am I not invested in every single story, but the show's biggest fault is lack of clarity in its direction. Many of these stories that we've established so far feel aimless and unimportant. As much as they've established likable characters that I find myself interested in, I don't find myself compelled by. I don't necessarily sense their importance to the larger story of the series, because the series doesn't feel so far like it has a larger story. It very much feels like an anthology show. I love this show from a technical standpoint. I enjoy the characters, but the stories so far don't really incite me on an emotional level. I haven't found myself attached to anyone. I enjoy this world because I am a fantasy nut, but I need this show to pick up the pace. Maybe episode 3 does that. I didn't watch episode 3 purposefully just so I could review the premiere as everyone who watched it at the time of the premiere did. And so I think we're off to a solid start, but the show needs to win me over. The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, slowly fleshes out its elaborate world, diverse power dynamics, and different unfolding stories, but doesn't do much in steering them in a converging direction. As a fantasy nerd, I'm interested, but not so much emotionally invested, as the series feels more like a collection of different, unrelated tales, too worried about crafting a mystery rather than one grand, epic adventure of small stories that naturally feed into and influence each other. It's a solid start, but one that is on shaky ground so far. But that is only my take on The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, episodes 1 and 2. I now need to go check out episode 3, but let me know what you make of it down there in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this Plato review. Big thanks to Movie Palette for their awesome offer, and make sure you use my code and check out the link in the description for a movie palette of your choice. Also tag me on Instagram or Twitter if you get one. I'd love to see yours. Big thanks to my channel members for always supporting the channel, and until the next one, love each other and love the movies.